Alright, so describe how the center shape and spread of T models changes the number of degrees of freedom increases. Okay, so a T model, unlike a normal model, is not static. So what it means is if I had 3 T distributions, okay, how would the center change? Okay, well the center doesn't change. The center is where the mean is. So the center is always going to be where mu is. Now how does the shape change? Okay, well the shape is generally going to be symmetric. Okay, but let's say I have a model that has we have a model that has 5 degrees of freedom, and then we have one that has, let's say, 25 degrees of freedom, and then one that has 200 degrees of freedom. Let's start with the 200 degrees of freedom. The one with 200 degrees of freedom is going to have a high center and is not going to have as much variation. This will be about approximately a normal model. So it will be like a normal distribution. When you get up to a degrees of freedom, when your sample size is high enough to get like 200 degrees of freedom, then your T distribution approaches a normal distribution. Now, if I had 25 degrees of freedom, then what would happen is the tails would be wider and the center would be lower. So what happens is this has wider tails and a lower center than that, but it's still symmetric and the center is still in the same place. Now if I had 5 degrees of freedom, then guess what? Lower degrees of freedom, wider tails, lower center. So you can see that this is flatter than this is flatter than that, okay, and the tails go out farther. Why? Because remember the guy Gossett, okay, he wanted tails that are farther out because he wanted a little bit of wiggle room not to reject when he had small samples. And so when he had small samples, he wanted to be sure that the sample was really bad if he was going to reject it. Now if you have like a medium-sized sample, then your tails will come in, it's easier to reject. And if you have a very large sample, then it comes into a normal distribution and it's basically your 68, 95, 99.7 rule, and then that would just follow that normal distribution.